It's translated differently. Sometimes it's translated as the awakening mind, sometimes as the mind of enlightenment, sometimes as the altruistic intention. Okay, there's different translations, but it has a very specific meaning. So the bodhicitta is a primary mental consciousness that has two aspirations. One aspiration is to work for the benefit of sentient beings, and the second aspiration is to attain full enlightenment. Okay, so primary mind that has those two aspirations along with it. That's what the bodhicitta is. So it has a very particular meaning. It doesn't mean just being a good person. Yeah, being a good person is good, but that doesn't make one a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva being somebody who has generated the bodhicitta. Okay, it takes actually quite a lot of effort to become a bodhisattva. In the Tibetan tradition, they talk about two methods for generating the bodhicitta. One is called the 7-point instruction of cause and effect, and the second method is called equalizing and exchanging self and others. So I have the great aspiration to go briefly through both of them in this one talk. But I also know that I often get stuck on the first point and don't get beyond that. So we'll see how far we get. Okay? But bodhicitta, whichever method of the two methods that we use to generate it, it has the common foundation of equanimity. Okay, so first we have to generate a mind of equanimity. What is it that we need to make equal? Our mind that is very biased and prejudiced. How are we prejudiced? We are attached to our friends. We have aversion and disdain for people that we don't like. And we have apathy and indifference for everybody else who's a stranger. Right? Does it sound like you live your life? Now, think about it. How do you relate to other people? Yeah, the people that you consider friends, so attached to, I want to be near them, I'll do anything for them, they're so wonderful. Then somebody who criticizes us, they're such an idiot, get them away from here. No. And then everybody else, I couldn't care less. Okay? Totally apathetic. Yeah. So with this kind of mind, that is not very smooth and stable, it becomes difficult to generate love and compassion for all sentient beings because we're so biased. We're so stuck in our opinions and judgments of other people. And if we look closely, okay, if we think about it, why are we attached to our friends? Certain people that we're attached to, friends and family. Why? Well, they're nice to us. They give us presents. They console us when we feel down. They help us. They do all sorts of nice things for us. So then we get attached to them. Okay. What about enemies? Why do we consider somebody an enemy and have aversion to them? Because they criticize us. Because they don't give us presents. Because they get in the way of what we want to do. Because they disagree with us and call us names, or they make threatening comments to us. And then the third category of people, the strangers, why do we feel apathetic to them? Well, they don't affect us one way or another. So it's almost as if they weren't even alive. Now, when you walk down the street, all these different sentient beings going places, you don't know them. It's also, we treat them almost as if they were robots. Now, not like they were real living beings with feelings. Okay? So all this judgment that we have, the attachment to the friends, the aversion to other people, the apathy, what's the common central locus of all these opinions that we have about other people, all these judgments? What's the common thread? It's how they relate to me. Isn't it? Yeah. You're nice to me, you're a good person. You're mean to me, you stink. You're not either nice or mean, I don't care. Okay. It's all predicated on how people relate to me, as if I am the center of the universe. Yeah. So if somebody shows their nice qualities to me, I call them a nice person. If they show their good qualities to somebody who I don't like, then they're not a nice person. They have the same good qualities, but it's depending who they show them to. Or they get angry, they have a temper tantrum. Okay? If they lose their temper at me, this is really a big deal. You know, how can somebody dare lose their temper at me? Don't they know who they're talking to? This is me. Okay. Whereas if somebody loses their temper at somebody who we don't like, good going. Then they become our friend, don't they? They have the same angry temper. Yeah, but if they show it towards somebody who we don't like, smart guy. Yeah. So, you can see we're completely biased, aren't we? We're the ones who create our friends. We're the ones who create our enemies. It's not that friends, enemies, and strangers are objective entities outside of us, but we create them because we categorize people and relate to them in terms of how they relate to me, the center of the universe. Okay, so it's totally subjective. There's not 1 ounce of truth in any of this, because the person that we think is so awful, somebody else loves and praises up and down. And the person we think is so wonderful, somebody else says, ugh. Okay? So, all this is just created by our own mind, based on me. So, one of the first things we have to do in our practice, if we're going to, generate bodhicitta, or even if we're going to live a happy life, is to get rid of these bumps, to get rid of this attachment and aversion and apathy. Okay? So one way to do it is by seeing that it all comes from our mind, that it's all totally self-created, all just opinions. And to see how totally transient and fickle our mind is. Because one day somebody's nice to us, oh, you're so wonderful, let's get married. Then the next day, they criticize us, ugh, I want a divorce. Yeah, from one day to the next, it changes, doesn't it? One day we want somebody to be very loving. The next day we want them to give us our space. Okay, we're totally fickle. Yeah, and then we, not realizing this, we judge other people for what's coming from our own mind. Okay? So just realizing how our mind is creating this is a big step in starting to let it go. And then seeing how these roles can change from one day to the next, it helps us see that somebody is not an inherent friend or an inherent enemy or an inherent stranger. Because, for example, when we came in to our life, everybody was a stranger to us. We didn't have one friend when we were born. Everybody was a stranger. Then, as time went on, some people went into the friend category. Then some people went into this enemy category. Some people stayed as strangers. Then more time went out. Some of the friends now went into the enemy category. And some of them went back to the stranger category. And some of the enemies we got to know in a different situation, and they became our friends. And then some of the enemies went back to becoming strangers. So it changes all the time. So therefore there's no sense in forming a very rigid image of somebody, and a rigid opinion of what somebody's like, because we see that relationships are constantly in flux. And the more we look at it and see how our mind creates these rigid categories, the more we can also see how painful these rigid categories are. Because when we make somebody into an enemy, are we happy? We keep on thinking it's their fault. You're my enemy because it's something in you. You're deficient, you're this, you're that. We blame them. But half the time, our enemies used to be friends. In fact, sometimes the people who were our worst enemies were the people that we were the most attached to before. Isn't it? Yeah? For example, who are you meaner to? Strangers or the people you love? When you get angry, who do you get the most angry with? Strangers or the people you love? Hello? Hello? Who do you get angrier with? The people you love. Would you ever say to a stranger what you would say to somebody who's a family member? No. We would never be that impolite to a stranger. But to a family member that we love, all sorts of garbage comes out of our mouth, doesn't it? Totally uncontrolled flow of garbage towards the people we love. So you can see, one day somebody's a loved one, next day we can't stand them. Then they're a loved one, then we can't stand them. It's all coming from our own mind. It's not because of them, it's because of our judgments and opinions. So just realizing that can help us equalize things. And also help us to see that often the people that we get the most angry at are the ones that we care the most about. And to come back and recognize in our heart that we actually do care about these people. Because sometimes we think we can just put somebody in the category, you're a rotten, mean person, and then just ignore them, throw them out the window, who cares about them? We've put them in a category, we don't have to relate to them anymore. That's completely wrong, isn't it? Yeah, completely wrong. And we only hurt ourselves, because often these are the people we care the most about. So what we're trying to do is develop some kind of balanced mind, okay, that doesn't cling on to our loved ones, doesn't push away the people who, we don't like or who have insulted or hurt us. And the mind that doesn't ignore everybody else. But instead, what we want to create with equanimity is an open heart that is open and receptive to everybody. And wouldn't that be nice? Just think about it from your own viewpoint. Wouldn't you be a lot happier if you had a heart that was open and receptive to everybody? If you weren't so prejudiced against people, grabbing at some people, pushing other people away, wouldn't you just be a lot happier? So we can see that this kind of meditation is something that's very much for our own benefit. It leads us to spiritual realizations, but it also leads us to be a lot happier now. Because when we close our heart in hatred to somebody, who is it that suffers? when we hold a grudge against somebody, usually a family member, because we would never hold a grudge against a stranger, would we? But when we hold a strong grudge and strong hatred or dislike towards somebody else, who suffers the most? Do they suffer? Maybe a little bit, but not much. Who's the one who suffers from the anger? We are, aren't we? When we have anger and hatred in our hearts, we're totally miserable. And we can go through our whole entire lives holding that anger and hatred. And I think that's why sometimes you see old people who are bitter, You've met old people in your life, they're so bitter. All they do is complain. And I think it's because they've held hatred and resentment in their hearts for a long time and haven't been able to release it. And then it just affects them. It makes them sick, makes them bent over, makes them totally unhappy. So just seeing how much our own hatred makes us miserable, that should be a strong motivating factor to give it up. Because we cherish ourselves, don't we? We love ourselves. We want ourselves to be happy. If we really want ourselves to be happy, we have to let go of our resentment and our aversion towards other people. Now sometimes our mind gets really stuck, I can't forgive them, they did this. And we pull out our long list of everything they did that we can't stand. They did this, and then they did this, and then can you imagine they did this? Oh. And then that wasn't enough. Then they did this, and they did this, and they did this. And then we finish the first page, we pull out the second page. And the list continues of everything they've ever done in their whole life that we find despicable and degenerate. They didn't wash their coffee cup. They left their dirty socks on the floor. They forgot to lock the door and they didn't comb their hair. Oh, And then in addition, they said mean things to me and they insulted me and they didn't support me when I really needed support and they betrayed my trust and they did this and that. We have the whole thing, don't we? Yeah. When it comes to holding grudges, we are the computer that doesn't have the delete button. Okay? We don't know how to delete our grudges. We just hold them, The hard drive of grudges that never crashes. But, this is really what we need to give up because we make ourselves so miserable for years doing that. And sometimes we say, well, I can't give up my grudge because they were wrong. How can I not be angry at somebody who's wrong? Well, think about it. Just because they were wrong, why do you have to be angry? Yeah? Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Think about it. Those of us who get very stuck in needing to be right, I'm right. They've got to back down on this argument and recognize I am right. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Because we can hold on to being right for our whole lifetime and feel totally self-righteous and be completely miserable. We've all experienced that, haven't we? So what use is being right? So what? We're right. Big deal. So what? All of our friends agree with us that we're right and they're wrong. So what? If we're still miserable, what good does being right do us? Absolutely no good at all. Okay? So sometimes we just have to give up our attachment to being right. Okay, somebody made a mistake. He's a sentient being. That's what sentient beings do, is they make mistakes. No, I'm a sentient being. I also make mistakes. Yeah. Somehow we're okay with our own mistakes, aren't we? Yeah. And other people should forgive us when we make our mistakes. And they should be tolerant of us when we make mistakes. Because we don't really mean harm when we make a mistake, do we? It was just we forgot, we were negligent, or we were unhappy, and others shouldn't hold a grudge against us because actually we're pretty nice people. No? Not just pretty nice, we're very nice. We're right. The whole world should honor us and respect us for that. No. And our mistakes, just little teeny things, not so significant. So other people, they shouldn't even notice our mistakes. And if they notice, then they should ignore them. And if they don't ignore them, then they should definitely forgive them and forget about them. Yeah. But their mistakes, different matter. Yeah. My husband makes a mistake, my wife makes a mistake, my kids make a mistake. Big deal. How dare they? They did it deliberately, and we make up this whole incredible story, don't we? Yeah. And inside of our heart, we have the judge, we have the jury, we have the prosecutor. There's no defense attorney. And we pull this person out, and the prosecutor in us prosecutes them, and the jury convicts them unanimously. In fact, the jury doesn't even need to go out for an hour to discuss. After 1 minute, the jury convicts them, and then the judge sentences them to death. And then we go, okay, good, got that accomplished. I'm right. Yeah? So, this way of thinking, our mind is just playing a big, big trick on us, and making us very, very unhappy. Okay. So I think it really behooves us to loosen a little bit, especially around the people we hold grudges against, which are usually family members. Yeah. I come from a family where you can never keep track of who's speaking to who. Okay? They have a family gathering, somebody in the family gets married. Well, you have to have many tables because this one doesn't speak to that one, who doesn't speak to that one, who doesn't speak to that one. You can't have them all sitting at one table. So you have to have many tables because they don't talk to each other. And this is what you teach your kids when you hold a grudge against somebody, is you teach your kids how to hate. Is that what you want to pass on to your kids? How to hold a grudge against a family member? When you hold grudges against your siblings, you're teaching your children that when they grow up, they shouldn't get along and they should hate each other. Is that what you want for your kids? If you hold a grudge against your husband or wife, what are you teaching your kids about relationships? So it's very, very important to try and let go of this. And one way to help us let go of it is to think of the kindness of the other person. Because when we've gotten stuck in holding on to our grudge, we're only picking out a few details about a person, and there's a whole lot more there. And especially with family members who we've known from a long time, I'm sure we can think of at least 1 or 2 or 3 good things that they've done. Yeah? Can't you? Now try hard. No, but really, if we open our mind to it, we can see that everybody has some good qualities and that everybody has been kind to us. And that often we don't appreciate other people's kindness. We take their kindness for granted. In fact, we have a sense of entitlement. Yeah. I am me, therefore I am entitled to be happy without having to try, without having to do anything. I am entitled to be rich without having to go to work. I am entitled to people being kind to me without me being kind to them. We have this sense of entitlement. And yet, really, when we open our eyes and look at it, it's other people who have been kind to us. And instead of feeling like we're entitled to their respect, that they're entitled to our respect. And instead of complaining that they should appreciate me more, let's open our minds and our hearts and appreciate them more. Because if we look, now people have been extraordinarily kind to us. Extraordinarily kind. Now friends and relatives, they do so many things for us. We live together, we share responsibilities. They've been very kind to us. Even people in society who we don't know, the people who repair the roads, who build the buildings, they've been incredibly kind to us. We wouldn't have the Buddhist library here if it weren't due to the kindness of all the people who built it. The architects, the engineers, the construction workers. We're really indebted to all these people. And even the people we don't like have benefited us in that they've provided challenges for us to grow with. And even though we've gone through difficulties, we've come out stronger. And we have to be able to look at the people who were involved in the difficult situations and say thank you. Because through my having gone through those difficulties, I realized I had inner resources that I didn't know about, and I grew stronger. See? So when we think in this way, we see that yes, everybody has some good qualities, and not only do they have good qualities, but we've also benefited from them. And so then instead of looking at the few things they've done that we don't like, we start to look at all the many things that they've done that we do appreciate. And instead of always nagging at them and harping at them and criticizing every small thing they do, we start to look and see at all the small, wonderful things they do, at all the little kindnesses they have, at all the small things that they're good at, not to mention the big things. And then our whole view of these people changes. So this is something, a way that we have to change our mind, to reach out and deliberately change how we view other people. Okay, so it has to be a conscious effort. We can't just sit there and say, oh yeah, I want to have equanimity, so you change and be a nicer person and then I'll stop hating you. That's not going to work. Okay? We have to, first of all, make a very conscious decision. I am tired of being prejudiced and biased. I am tired of holding grudges and resentment in my heart. I want to change. We have to have that determination inside. And then, once we have that determination, we start looking at the disadvantages of holding grudges, and we start looking at the good qualities and the kindness of the people that before we've been biased against. Okay? And we train our mind to look at somebody else's good qualities. Like I said, it's a conscious, deliberate effort. We train our mind to do it. And then gradually, as we train our mind to see their good qualities, it becomes more and more natural. And then the whole way the person appears to us is completely different. I was talking about this one time when I was in the States to one group of people. And I gave the group a homework assignment. Their homework assignment was for the next week to try and say something nice about somebody every day. And in particular, to try and say something nice to somebody who you didn't get along with. Okay. So that was their homework assignment. So the next week, after that, one man came up to me and he said, I have this colleague at work who's just impossible, I can't do that homework assignment with him. Anybody else I can do it, but him, no. I said, look, just go and try. So the next week, coming into class, this man was arriving at the same time I was. So, we met outside the door and I said, well, how was your week? How did it go? And he said, well, I tried the homework assignment. And the first day, I saw this colleague at work, the one I can't stand, and I couldn't think of one nice thing to say to him. So I made something up. I made something up, and I said something nice to him. And then, the next day, that guy was a little bit nicer to me. So then it was easier to say something nice to him the next day. And then the day after that, he was even a little bit nicer. So it was even easier to say something nice. So you see, sometimes if we're willing to put ourselves out there and say something nice and be kind from our side, then the other person starts changing. And even if they don't change, just the fact that our mind has changed changes the relationship and changes our experience of that person. But if our mind doesn't change, then we're going to go through years and years of bitterness and resentment. No fun. Okay. So it's really worthwhile, nudge our mind a little bit. Try and think kind thoughts to recognize other people's kindness. Just even in thinking, oh, they did the dishes. Oh, they took out the garbage. Oh, they gave me a ride. Isn't that kind? Now, just start with the small things and really appreciate that. And especially with family members, try and say please. Try and say thank you. Those are not forbidden words in families. And it can make a very big difference. Okay? So you see, in this way, we're able to make our mind a little bit more balanced. Not so much attachment for the loved ones, not so much anger and resentment towards others. And then we also begin to open our hearts towards the strangers and see that they're human beings or sentient beings just like us. They want to be happy and they don't want to suffer, just like us. Okay, so equanimity is the foundation for both of those ways of generating bodhicitta. Okay, now let's look more in depth at the way that is the 7-point instruction of cause and effect. So this has 6 causes and then 1 effect, which is bodhicitta. So it's a series of consecutive meditations that we do. The first meditation we do is to recognize that all sentient beings have been our mother. And usually, for us, our mother is the one that we can, whose kindness we often feel very deeply. And to recognize that other beings have also been our mother, maybe not in this life, but in previous lives. Because there's been beginningless previous lives, infinite number of sentient beings, plenty of time for others to have been our mothers, not just once, but many, many times. So this can be an interesting thing to think about when, think about your colleagues. Okay? Think about the garbage collectors. Think about Osama bin Laden and George Bush. They've all been our mothers and they've all been kind. George Bush? Are you kidding? This gets us to stretch our mind a little bit and realize that people have not always been who they are in this particular life. That we've been, born in different relationships with them in different lifetimes. And they have first been our mother, our parents, and then second step, to think about is they've been kind to us as our parents and done so much for us. They've given us our body. They woke up in the middle of the night to feed us. They give us an education. They take care of us when we're sick. So realize that every sentient being's, done that for us. Then third, once we've contemplated the kindness that others have shown us as our parents in previous lives, then automatically the third part is there's a feeling to repay that kindness. And that comes very spontaneously. Because when we see ourselves as having been the recipient of kindness and generosity, then the wish to return it arises without much effort. Then the next step, fourth, is to generate love, wishing others to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And so here is where the metta meditation comes in. Okay? And because we've spent some time seeing others as kind, then we experience them as being lovable, and then wishing them happiness becomes very easy. And we can do a metta meditation, wishing others not only to have happiness of this life, but wish them to have the happiness of liberation, the happiness of enlightenment, the happiness of actual freedom. Okay. Then the fifth step is compassion, which is the wish for sentient beings to be free of suffering. Okay, so again, we generalize this to all beings, really wanting them to be free of suffering. So we let go of the mind of vengeance that wants to retaliate and get even, and instead we really wish others to be free of suffering. Then the sixth step is what's called the great resolve, and where we say, yes, I want others to have happiness, and yes, I want them to be free of suffering. And it's not just good enough to wish that for others, but I have to be actually engaged. I have to do something. So the great resolve is a resolve to begin to change ourselves, to do something that will bring about happiness and eliminate suffering. And so those 6 steps, seeing others as our mother, recognizing their kindness as our mother, wishing to repay it, love, compassion, and the great resolve, those 6 are the 6 causes. They give rise to the 7th point, which is the result, which is bodhicitta, that aspiration for full enlightenment. Because with the great resolve, we have resolved to get involved and bring others happiness and eliminate their suffering. But we recognize that as limited sentient beings, it's very difficult for us to do that because we're so filled with our own stuff. Yeah? So we recognize, hey, I have to purify my defilements and eliminate my obscurations so that I can really open my heart to others and, bring about their happiness and eliminate their suffering. So how best can I do this? Well, who is capable of benefiting sentient beings the most? It's a fully enlightened Buddha. So therefore, we generate the aspiration, I too want to become a Buddha in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings most effectively. Okay, so then we have generated the bodhicitta motivation. Okay, so that's that first way of generating bodhicitta, the 7-point instruction of cause and effect. Then the second way is called equalizing and exchanging self and others. And this is a way that I like the first method, but I really like this method. Okay? Because here we start out not just with equanimity, which we've generated before, because equanimity is between friend, enemy, and stranger, but here we're equalizing self and others. So we're equalizing not just friend, enemy, and stranger, but self and others. Yeah. That's a little bit trickier because until now we've always held ourselves as the most important one. And so with this one we begin to see everybody wants to be happy equally, everybody wants to be free of suffering equally. There's no difference between myself and others. And think about this. This is a very profound thing to really familiarize our mind with. Spend a whole day and every single person you look at, think, they want to be happy and be free of suffering just as much as I do. You wake up in the morning, you see your family members, look at each one individually and think, they want to be happy and be free of suffering just as much as I do. Go to work, look at your colleagues. They want to be happy and free of suffering just as much as I do. Look at the strangers on the bus, or the strangers who walk by you on the street, or the strangers on the news, and think they want to be happy and free of suffering just as much as I do. And when you really familiarize your mind with that thought, wow, it's totally incredible what happens inside, because you begin to feel so close to other sentient beings. Even animals, even insects, when you look at them, they look different, because instead of saying, ooh, there's a mosquito, you say, oh, there's a sentient being who wants to be happy and be free of suffering as intensely as I do. Or when you're driving on the road, if somebody cuts you off, instead of honking your horn and, swearing at the person, you say, there's somebody who wants to be happy and be free of suffering just as much as I do. Now, our whole way of relating to people changes. Yeah, even you see the cats running around in the alleyways. Wow, they want to be happy and free of suffering, just like me. You look at people on TV. You look at Osama bin Laden. You look at George Bush. And you say, they want to be happy and free of suffering, just like me. They may be very confused about how their method of getting happiness. Might be a very confused method. But their wish to be happy and be free of suffering is instinctive, just like mine. And this begins to wear away at our self-centeredness, because we see that ourselves and others are totally equal in that regard. It's quite powerful, very, very powerful. because, it cuts back on this feeling of entitlement. It cuts back on this feeling of, here am I. The world should be so happy to have me here. Okay? Because this is what our self-cherishing, our self-centered thought thinks, isn't it? The world should bow down to me. They are so lucky that I'm here. I am such a wonderful person. My family is so lucky to have me. Okay, I'm in a bad mood once in a while, but they're so lucky to have me and my company. Oh, my boss should make 3 prostrations to me every day. He's so fortunate to have me as an employee. Okay, so it starts to chip away at that extremely self-centered mind. And we begin then, to see the disadvantages of our self-centered mind. And we look at our experience very closely, and we begin to see how unhappy we get when we're self-centered. That the more we think about ourselves, the more unhappy we get. Okay? And that's how self-centeredness deceives us. Because self-centeredness, it's not who we are. It's not our nature. Okay? Our selfish mind is not our inherent nature. It's one defilement that sits there and whispers in our ear and says, I'm going to take care of you, follow me. And we look at the defilement of self-centeredness and we say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And we follow it. And it makes us miserable. Because the more we spin around ourselves, then the more offended we get. Because we're so sensitive about how everybody relates to us. You're talking to me, you better use the right words. Yeah, don't give me a dirty look. Yeah. Okay. So we become so super sensitive towards every tiny, tiny thing everybody does towards center of the universe, me. Okay. And we begin to realize how unhappy we get by having that view. Okay. So we begin to let it go. And we begin to see that all the negative karma we've created all came through self-centeredness. Now, if we look back, all of our negative karma we've created in our life, think of the worst thing you ever did, the thing you have the most regret for. Did you ever do that with the thought, I want to benefit other sentient beings? No. Yeah. We don't go say, I'm going to kill somebody for the benefit of others. I'm going to go have an extramarital affair for the benefit of sentient beings. I'm going to lie and criticize and talk behind people's back out of compassion. We don't think like that, do we? Why do we lie and steal and have extramarital affairs and say nasty things behind people's back? It's all coming from our self-centered attitude. So all that negative karma came because of the self-centeredness. Okay. So we look again and again and again at all the disadvantages of self-centeredness. And this is not saying that we're bad people because we're selfish. Okay, repeat. We're not saying we're bad people because we're selfish. Because remember, our selfishness is not our inherent nature. What we're doing is we're saying that we suffer more when we're selfish. And others suffer more when we're selfish. Okay? And so seeing that, then we begin to restrain that self-centered mind. And the more we restrain it, the happier we are. Okay? Then the next step is we start thinking of the benefits of cherishing others and how much happiness that brings. Because we know for ourselves, when other people cherish and appreciate us, how happy we are, well, that's exactly how happy they are when we cherish and appreciate them. So if you think, how do I want, I want to make somebody happy, how do I do it? Respect them. Respect them as a human being. Appreciate their good qualities. Point out their good qualities to them. It doesn't harm us to praise other beings. In fact, it's very much a virtuous practice to praise others and tell them their good qualities. Okay? So we begin to see all the benefits that accrue, how much happier we are when we actually cherish others. We're happier now. We create much better karma. That makes our future lives happier. It eliminates the obscurations from our mind. It facilitates our gaining Dharma realizations. So cherishing others only has benefits. There's no drawbacks to it. Okay? So after that, we've equalized self and others. We've seen the faults of self-centeredness. We've seen the advantages of cherishing others. Then the next step is we exchange self and others. So exchanging self and others doesn't mean I become you and you become me. What it means is that instead of always thinking my happiness is the most important, we think others' happiness is the most important. And instead of thinking others' suffering, yeah, it hurts, but, it's okay, it's not too bad. We start thinking, no, their suffering is important, and my suffering is not so important. It can wait. Okay? So when we exchange self and others, what we're exchanging is who our priority is. And if we want to be truly democratic, think about it. There's one of me, and how many other sentient beings? Infinite minus one. Okay? So we're going to have a vote between 1 and infinite minus 1 to see who's more important. Okay? We believe in democracy. Who wins? Infinite minus 1 wins. Okay? So it means that others are more important than little old me. So this doesn't mean we neglect ourselves. No, we still keep our body healthy. We take care of our health and, do things. Because otherwise we become a burden for others. But we take care of ourselves because we want to use our body and mind in the service of others. Because others' happiness is important, and others' suffering is important. Okay, so we exchange self and others. Then, having done that, the next step is a meditation called Tonglen in Tibetan, or taking and giving. And this meditation is really quite beautiful, and it's the total opposite of our self-centered mind. Because usually our ordinary way of thinking is, oh, there's a problem? You can have it. There's something good? I'll take it. Right? Yeah? At work, there's some difficulty in the project? Oh, it's your fault. There's something good in the project? Oh, that's mine. I did that. Okay? Yeah? So we're always, very generous when it comes to giving out problems. and very stingy when it comes to sharing happiness. So here in the taking and giving meditation, what we're doing is totally reversing that. There's a problem, I'll take it. There's happiness, it's yours. So it's a very profound meditation based on generating love and compassion for others, in which we imagine other living beings, and think of their pain and misery, and with really great compassion and a very sincere wish that they be free of it, we think, may I take their misery upon myself? And we imagine their misery coming out of them as pollution. And then we take it, we inhale it into ourselves. But we don't just inhale others' suffering and let it sit inside of us, because that doesn't do any good. But as it comes in, it turns into a lightning bolt that then crashes and smashes our own self-centered attitude, which we visualized as a hard lump at our own heart. So we take others' suffering, which is what they don't want. We transform it into this thunderbolt, and it destroys our own self-centeredness, which is what we don't want. So you see, everybody wins in that situation. We're not just taking suffering and sitting there with it, getting depressed. No, we're taking it and transforming it and using it to destroy the self-centeredness, which is the cause of all of our own problems. And then, within that open space at our heart, a light shines, and that's the light of our own loving, compassionate thought. And we then imagine that we're able to take all of our possessions and multiply and transform them so that they become what others need, and we send them out and give them to others, and they receive them, and they're happy. We imagine taking our body and likewise being able to multiply and transform our body and send it out so it becomes whatever everybody else needs. And similarly, our positive potential, all of our merit, we don't hold with selfishness and stinginess onto that, but we give that also, and we send it out to other living beings, and it becomes good circumstances for them to meet the Dharma. So they have teachers, they have teachings, they have retreat places and monasteries and Dharma centers. And we imagine we even give our merit away, and it becomes realizations so that other living beings quickly become Buddhas. Okay, so it's a very, very powerful meditation, this taking and giving one. And then through it, it becomes very easy to generate bodhicitta, because, if we really want to take on others' suffering and give them happiness, well, we have to become a Buddha to do that. So then, yes, I want to purify all the defilements and all the stains of the defilements in my own mind, because I want to gain all these capacities to be of the greatest service to other living beings. So that's the second way of generating bodhicitta, that method of equalizing and exchanging self and others. So we equalize, self and others are equally important because we both want to be happy, we want to be free of suffering. There's many disadvantages to being self-centered. There's only benefits to cherishing others. So I'm going to exchange who the focus of who I'm working for is, and instead of it being self, it's going to be others. And then generating, doing the taking and giving meditation, being willing to take on difficulties, giving others happiness, and then the bodhicitta, wanting to become a fully enlightened Buddha, so that we will have the capabilities to do this in the best way. So lo and behold, we actually did both methods of generating bodhicitta in a very, very brief way, but we did them. There's one book by Geshe Jampa Tekchok called Transforming the Heart, the Buddhist Path to Joy and Courage. And he has wonderful, wonderful chapters on these two methods of generating bodhicitta. So I refer you to that book as well. Okay, so now we have some time for some questions and some discussion here, so please ask whatever you wish.
It's a very sad case. It's a very sad case, and I would like to have your guidance on this particular case.
Okay. So the situation is that she has a friend who does hospice work, and one of the patients or clients in the hospice work is terminally ill with cancer, and he's done some harmful actions in his life, and he wants to make amends now before he dies, and especially he's seeking his wife's forgiveness, and his wife is saying, no. I don't want to forgive you. So it's a very painful situation. It's a very sad situation. So she would like my comments on it. Okay, one comment is, we've all made mistakes. The principal thing in our being able to purify our negative karma is for us to be able to regret our mistakes. So we generate very sincere regret, and then we try and restore the relationship through, in the case of holy beings, by taking refuge with them if they were the ones that we harmed, or in the case of other sentient beings, by generating bodhicitta towards them. That's the way to restore the relationship. So the main way of restoring the relationship is the transformation in our own heart. The main way of purifying is by generating regret in our own heart. So I think that it needs to be pointed out to this man that, yes, of course you're seeking your wife's forgiveness, but you've already done the important step of acknowledging the harm that you've done. And even if she is unable to forgive you right now, don't worry about it, because her lack of forgiveness is her problem. And you can die knowing that you have regretted the wrongs that you've done, and you don't need to carry that baggage with you as you die. Okay? So that needs to be made clear to the dying person, so that they don't feel like they're being held hostage by the person who won't forgive them. They need to know that they've done the essential part of the purification work by generating regret, and from their side having a kind attitude towards the person they harmed, and also developing a very strong intention not to do the action again. So make that evident to the person who's dying, so that they can die with a clear conscience and a clear mind, without being held captive, okay, or being held hostage by the unforgiving spouse. Okay. In the case of the spouse, what you need to do, and whenever you go on hospice work, I think one of the first things you need to do is drop your agenda. Drop your idea of how you want the situation to be. Because if you go into a situation such as counseling or hospice or whatever with your idea of, I want him to apologize and I want her to forgive, and then I want him to have a nice peaceful death with her at the bedside holding his hand. Are you trying to help them, or are you trying to choreograph your own, the drama that you invented in your own head? Yeah? It's extremely important when we're trying to help others to let go of our expectation and our ideas of how we think they should behave, how we think they should feel, what we think they should do and say. You gotta drop it, okay? Because if your friend is going in there with the idea of, I am gonna get that woman to forgive her husband if it kills me, then you're going to have more death than his on your hands. Okay? So that person who feels that it's so difficult to forgive, she needs some compassion. If you go in there and you're just pushing and pushing and pushing, she doesn't have the emotional nourishment that she needs to be able to forgive. So you have to give her some emotional nourishment. She needs some compassion. Yeah, you need to say, yes, you've suffered a lot, and that hurts. Yeah, she needs to feel like somebody understands her suffering. And when she feels that somebody has understood her suffering, then you can start to say, wouldn't it be nice to let go of that suffering? And then she can start to think, oh yeah, I've suffered, somebody understands it, but I don't want to hold on to that suffering. I've held on to it long enough. And then she might be able to start forgiving. Because the forgiving benefits her. She's the main recipient of the forgiveness. He benefits a little, but his main benefit came from the regret. Her main benefit comes from forgiving. But, she needs to feel understood before she's going to be able to forgive. And you don't know whether you have the time left before he dies for her to feel sufficiently understood so she can forgive. So you just have to give up your agenda and your expectations and just do what you can in the situation. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can all make prayers for them.
How do we regain our delight in the Dharma?
How do we regain our delight in the Dharma? This is assuming that you've lost your delight in the Dharma. Yeah. And sometimes that happens. I think one of the way, there's a few ways in which we lose our delight in the Dharma. One way is when our practice just becomes very rote. Oh yeah, I did this meditation yesterday, and I did it the day before. I did it the day before, and I know I'm going to do it today, and I know I'm going to do it tomorrow, and it's so boring. I'm just bored with my meditation. Okay, that's one way we lose our delight in the Dharma. Another way we lose our delight in the Dharma is we get distracted by all the pleasures of samsara. Oh, Prince Charming! He's so much better than the Buddha. Yeah. And our mind is zipped off. We can spend hours meditating on the wonders of Prince Charming, and the Buddha, is not nearly as sexy or interesting. Okay, so we've gotten distracted by samsara. Okay, so that makes us lose our delight in the Dharma. Another way we lose our delight in the Dharma is we push ourselves. Yeah, we develop this mind of, okay, I've got to try harder. I've got to meditate really well. I've got to gain samadhi. Single-pointed. Undistracted. Enlightenment. And we get so tight, We just get wound up and tight, and we push ourselves and beat ourselves up. Oh, I've got to be a better disciple. Oh, I've got to meditate more. Oh, I'm so selfish. Oh, I'm so ignorant. Hurt. And we just beat ourselves up. Okay, self-criticism, self-hatred. Oh, I just can't practice well. I'm so terrible. Okay, so that also makes us lose our joy in the Dharma, doesn't it? Okay, so you can see, just by how all those different mental states are, you can see that all of them are unrealistic and really quite dumb, aren't they? You know? Bored with the Dharma. Well, you know, enliven your practice. Make it more relevant to your own life. Think about the Dharma in terms of your own life, or think about your own life in terms of the Buddha's teaching. Then your practice won't be boring anymore. If you're distracted by samsara, you know, if you start thinking Prince Charming is better than the Buddha, you got real problems. Okay? If you think that new condo is better than the Pure Land, think again. Okay? You know, so meditate a little bit on death. Think of the disadvantages of cyclic existence. That'll bring your mind back to the Dharma. You won't be so distracted. Okay? If you're beating yourself up thinking that you should be better, just recognize I am what I am, and I can accept myself for what I am. I can accept myself for what I am now and try and change and be better in the future. Why not? Okay. So just let go of all that self-hatred and self-criticism. Then your practice gets more exciting. Also, think of the qualities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Arhats. Yeah. Think of the good qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That makes our mind very happy, and it inspires our mind to practice the path to gain those same qualities ourselves. Okay? You had a question. But his first question was, what inspired me to write Working with Anger? What inspired me was my own anger and my own misery at being angry. Okay? I had a lot of trouble, and still do sometimes, with anger. Okay? I'm not necessarily the kind of person who explodes. Yeah. But you can be very angry and not explode. Okay? You can be very angry, and what do? You shut up and shut down inside. I'm so angry that I don't look at you. I don't talk to you. I don't even recognize you exist. Yeah? Who else deals with their anger like that? Who are you? Who of you are the explosive people? Yell, scream, shout, throw things. Who of you are the shut down people? Don't say anything. Okay. So we have the hot way of dealing with anger and we spew it out, and we have the cold way of dealing with anger and we freeze it inside. Okay? So I was pretty miserable with my own anger. Yeah. And so, in particular, when I was living in Italy, my teacher sent me to work at a Dharma center in Italy. So I am kind of, you know, an American woman who believes in gender equality, and he sent me to work with one macho Italian monk. Boy, you know, we were there was no nuclear test ban treaty between us. No. So I would get angry at him every day, and I'd go back to my room and I would read Shantideva's book, Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Chapter 6 on patience. I would read it every night, calm down, go back, see him the next day, get angry again. Because this guy, it was all his fault. You've got to understand that. I was sweet and innocent. I didn't do anything wrong. I was so pleasant, easy to get along. Well, maybe once in a while I was a little difficult. But really, I mean, it was all his fault. Totally his fault. He did this and he did this and he did this and he did this. You know, believe me. So, anyway, okay, so you get the point? So, you know, I'd get angry at him during the day, read this book at night. And... Yeah, and so I began to learn the book quite well. You know, it took me a while to learn to practice it, but you know, you just keep trying. You just keep putting it into practice. Just keep doing it again and again and again. There's no other way. You know, you just keep doing it. Okay, and so it was through learning Shantideva's book very well and dealing with it, you know, working with those methods in my own life, and then thinking, you know, that other people suffer from anger and perhaps they could benefit from this as well. So I wrote the book. It's entirely plagiarized. Okay, not one new idea. Everything is copied from Shantideva. Completely admit it. Yeah, totally plagiarized everything he wrote. But he lived 12 or 13 centuries ago, so maybe he won't sue me. But, you know, I just tried to take his ideas and, you know, put them, give modern examples to him. Okay? Okay, so let's sit quietly, do a little bit of what I call digestion meditation, to digest the talk. So, you know, we'll just have short 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. Think about something you heard tonight and put it into practice in your own life. Okay, so practice something you heard, relate it to your own life so that it really changes how you feel.